I hope you're wondering about the market, the direction of the economy, its strength, because this is the part of the show where we're going to turn to two folks to get the answers to those questions. Former New York Federal Reserve President Bill Dudley is not one of them. Dudley is spending his time lightly defending comments that he made in some, well, without question, irrational fashion, urging the Federal Reserve to actually undermine President Trump's 2020 re-election. A lot of people thought Dudley was a fairly bright fellow until recently. Dudley writing today, quote, "I wrote the article to express my concern that the president had placed the negative economic consequences of his trade war at the feet of the Fed and that Fed officials had not pushed back against this more forcibly. I was not," he said, he claimed, he averred, "not trying to suggest that the Fed should take sides in the upcoming election." The hell he wasn't. Joining me tonight, Bill Lee, chief economist at the Milken Institute, John Lonski, managing director, chief economist at Moody's. Great to have you both here. Bill, let me start with Dudley's credibility and his maximum exposure as a complete failure as a politico-fed operator.
Lou, Bill Dudley has set a new low for inappropriate behavior on the part of ex-Fed officials. My God, this man has truly done the equivalent of telling a fighter, go into the next round and pull your punches. Because the job of the Fed is to ensure maximum employment and price stability regardless of whatever shocks hit the economy. Their job is to make sure we've got the growth to propel the economy forward. And he is telling them, you know, let whatever market turmoil take place because it's going to hurt President Trump.
Yeah, raise those
ridiculous.
Rates,
and I'm ashamed to say that I was a former Fed staffer at the New York Fed.
Well, you know, it's just good that you didn't rise much higher. Let's leave it at that, Bill. John, you know, as Bill says, and I thought it was interesting that he qualified it a little bit, a new low for former Fed officials. There are lower lows for current Fed officials, apparently.
Yeah, he was trying to politicize the Fed, which was a very foolish thing to go ahead and do. I mean, the last thing we need is a Federal Reserve where they conduct monetary policy according to whether or not they think fiscal policy is appropriate, where they, by default, could care less about economic performance. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
Well, what will happen anytime soon, Bill? I want to get both of you to answer this. Where are we headed right now with this economy? We have got, of course, a cadre of savants who've lost a lot of money, by the way, over the course of the past year or two, trying to tell us that we're in a new direction because of either technical reasons, whatever it may be, but they're talking down the market and they're talking down the economy.
There is a manufacturing slowdown around the world, no question about it. There's a manufacturing slowdown that's showing up in the data in the United States, no question about it. But remember, Lou, manufacturing is only 11% of the U.S. economy, 8% of total employment. It's a very small share, important share. And what President Trump is trying to do is say, we're going to fix manufacturing, not by just pulling back manufacturing willy-nilly. We're going to pull back the highest value-added jobs, and we're going to make sure we get trading partners who will share in our gain. We're going to take the huge deficit we have with China, carve it up, and give it to our new trading partners who are willing to be part of this resurgence of manufacturing in the United States and among its trading partners. You know, that is the new policy.
And the Hill, with this new survey, 67%, a very important survey, I think, of Americans supporting the president's tariffs. They understand what this is about. I don't hear quite the same discussion and debate about tariffs. We have a very clear view of what the president's doing.
Let me quickly start by stating that the slowdown in global manufacturing is not entirely the consequence of this trade conflict between the United States and China. This also has something to do with a massive buildup of inventories late last year, early this year.
A cyclical, natural result.
Yeah, right. And so I think that's, you know, something you want to keep an eye on. I think there's a good chance the U.S. economy is going to go ahead and continue to grow. We had pretty good news on auto sales for the month of August.
And how much does the market go up tomorrow?
How much does it go up? 150 points, Dow Jones.
All right. Bill Lee, thanks so much. John Lonski.